You try to let go, but something in you still clings. Not to the object or the person or the outcome, but to the story you built around it. The one that says, if I lose this, I lose myself. And so even when your hands are open, your heart is closed. Because surrender isn't about what leaves, it's about what you're still holding on to inside. That's where the real pain lives. Stay with me. Don't run just yet. You don't need to be ready to release everything. You just need to be willing to see what you're still gripping, without judgment, without defense. Just a quiet honesty. I'm afraid of what will be left if I let go. That's not weakness. That's the doorway. We were taught to fight for what we want and to resist what hurts. We build our sense of self through survival, through control. And so the very idea of surrender feels like failure, like giving up. But true surrender doesn't take from you. It frees you. It makes space for what's real. It teaches your soul how to breathe again without needing to hold everything together. The truth is, some of the weight you carry doesn't belong to the present. It's built from the past, from expectations, losses, roles you had to play, or things you were never allowed to feel. And now, even in silence, you carry all of it as if it were you. But it isn't, and you know it. That's why it's so heavy. Letting go isn't an action, it's a process of honesty. It begins when you admit that your control was never real, that your attachment didn't prevent the pain, that all your resistance only delayed the peace. And when you stop fighting life, you don't fall, you're caught by something deeper, something sacred. Jesus lived from that place, not from control, but from presence, not from force, but from alignment. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. That is not a phrase of resignation. It is a declaration of absolute trust. And when you say it in your own way, it doesn't make the fear disappear, but it makes you real again. Maybe your fear isn't of letting go. Maybe it's of what comes after, the quiet, the unknown, the blank page where the story used to live. But that silence isn't empty. It's where new life begins. And you can only hear what God is really saying when your own voice softens long enough to stop interrupting Him. There's no shame in holding on. It just means something mattered to you. Something once gave you a sense of identity, of meaning, of safety. The goal isn't to erase it. It's to stop letting it define you. You are not your attachment. You are not the story. You are not the fear of losing it. Surrender doesn't ask you to love the pain. It asks you to stop pretending it's your home, to stop feeding the loop that says, I'll only be okay when, and to start trusting that maybe, just maybe, you're already being held, even here, even now, even without all the answers. There's a kind of faith that isn't loud. It's not built in certainty. It's built in quiet, often alone, when no one is clapping and nothing feels clear. It's not the faith that moves mountains outside you. It's the one that moves your heart back into your body, back into trust, back into breath. You'll know you're surrendering when you stop trying to win. When your question shifts from, how do I fix this, to, what am I being asked to feel right now? That shift is not passive, it's powerful. It reconnects you to the present, where God still speaks, not through guarantees, but through grace. Letting go might look like staying silent when you usually explain, or walking away when you'd rather prove, or resting instead of pushing harder. It may look small on the outside, but inside, it's the moment the chain breaks, and your soul remembers it was never supposed to carry that weight alone. There's no formula for surrender. You won't always feel peace immediately. Sometimes you'll feel emptier, but don't confuse emptiness with absence. Sometimes God clears space so He can enter again. Not to fix, but to dwell. Not to answer, but to stay. If you've ever felt like your grip is exhausting you, you're not alone. This is where many arrive, not because they're weak, but because they've reached the end of managing everything themselves. And that end, that sacred exhaustion, is where real faith begins. Not belief, but trust. Lived, breathed, embodied. Christ didn't promise clarity. He promised presence. He didn't promise control. He promised peace, the kind that makes no sense but anchors you anyway. My peace I give you, not as the world gives. That peace doesn't come from getting everything right. It comes from releasing everything that's false. What you're letting go of isn't always external. Sometimes it's your image of how it was supposed to go, the version of yourself that never struggled, the plan you made before life introduced you to who you really are. And when that version fades, What remains is more honest, more whole. You don't need to surrender perfectly. There is no perfect way. Just a quiet choice to stop tightening, to breathe, to say, God, I don't know what comes next, but I trust you to meet me there. That trust, that whispered yes, is how freedom begins. If you're still here, it means something in you is already softening. That's not weakness, that's readiness. A willingness to meet life where it is, not where you wish it was. And from that place, everything begins to change. Not from force, but from faith. Not from fear, but from presence. So take your time. Don't rush this. Let these words land in the space beneath your thoughts. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breath return. There's nothing to force, nothing to fix. Just this quiet moment and the one who is in it with you. Letting go, surrendering, having faith, these sound beautiful in words. But in real life, they are often quiet acts of courage. Not big gestures, not dramatic moments. They're the small, invisible decisions you make when no one is watching, like not sending that message, like breathing before you answer, like choosing stillness when every part of you wants to fix. What holds you back isn't the lack of faith, it's the fear of falling if you let go. The fear that if you loosen your grip, everything will collapse, your relationships, your plans, your identity. So you keep holding, even when it exhausts you. You keep controlling, even when it's clear you've reached your limit. That's where surrender begins. In the moment you realize that control is no longer strength, it's just habit. Faith, in its truest form, is not certainty. It's intimacy. It's walking through the dark and knowing you're not alone. It's saying, even if I don't understand, I trust. That trust isn't born from knowledge. It's born from presence. From choosing to stay, not because the path is clear, but because you know who's walking beside you. Jesus never promised a life without tension, but he did show us how to walk through it, not with fear, but with confidence in the Father's care. Do not be anxious, he said. Your Father knows what you need. He never said you wouldn't feel fear. He said fear doesn't have the final word. The final word belongs to love. And love often asks you to release, not because something is wrong, but because something deeper wants to grow. Like a seed letting go of its shell. Like the tide letting go of the shore. Faith is not passive. It's not about waiting for life to happen. It's about opening your hands and trusting that life will meet you there. You'll recognize yourself in this process when you feel a quiet discomfort around your own pace, when your prayers start sounding more like negotiations, when the thing you once carried with joy now feels heavier than it should. These are not failures. They're invitations. Invitations to pause, to realign, to ask, what am I still trying to control? Control often hides in good intentions, in wanting to protect, to prepare, to prevent pain. But Christ invites you to something more honest, a life where peace comes not from guarding your future, but from trusting that you're guided in the present. Seek first the kingdom, he said, not because you should ignore what matters to you, but because peace flows from alignment, not from fear. This alignment doesn't silence the chaos around you. It calms the war within you. It brings your heart and mind back into the same room. It lets you show up fully in what's real, not what's imagined, not what's feared, but what's actually happening. That's where trust grows roots, not in your plans, in your presence. There's a reason why surrender feels like death, because in a way, it is. It's the death of the false self, the death of the story that says, I am what I control. And in its place, something truer is born, a self that is not defined by what it holds, but by what it allows, a self that is not afraid to let life shape it. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what was never yours to hold alone. It means allowing God to take the lead, even if that means walking slower than you'd like. It means releasing outcomes and returning to your soul. That's not giving up, that's giving over. Some days, this will look like rest, like doing nothing and being okay with that, like trusting that growth is still happening beneath the surface, like believing that your surrender is not wasted space, but sacred ground, a place where grace meets you without performance. Other days, it will feel like loss, because you'll feel the weight of what you thought would happen, the plan, the timing, the person. And there, in the ache, faith becomes more than a word. It becomes the substance of what you hope for and the evidence of what you cannot yet see. The more you practice this, the more you'll notice something shift. Not necessarily around you, but within you. The same situation, but less fear. The same unknown, but more trust. And little by little, the silence inside you becomes less threatening. It becomes home. Christ modeled this with his life. He didn't cling to status. He didn't cling to safety. Even in his last breath, he said, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." That's not weakness. That's the deepest kind of power, to release everything and still know who you are. You don't have to get to that place all at once. You just have to notice the moment when your grip tightens and ask, "What am I afraid of?" Not to shame yourself, but to see yourself. To let Christ meet you there, not with judgment, but with presence. Real faith is not built by always feeling strong. It's built in the moments when you lean into grace instead of pressure, when you choose to be held instead of holding everything yourself. That's where the shift happens, in breath, in stillness, in surrender. And maybe right now, something in you is softening, not because this is easy, but because it's time. Time to stop performing trust and start experiencing it. Time to stop managing God and start walking with Him again, not as a system, as a presence. You don't need a grand gesture to begin, just a small moment of release, a prayer whispered through clenched teeth, a breath taken without knowing what's next. That's where your faith starts to breathe again, in the ordinary, in the unknown, in the now. Let this space be the beginning of that breath. Let it hold you in the in-between, not to fix you, not to push you, just to be with you, until your own soul begins to say, "I can loosen this grip. I can let God carry what I no longer need to." That's where presence begins. That's where peace grows. If you've come this far, I won't offer a formula, just 3 quiet steps, simple enough to carry in your breath, yet deep enough to change the way you walk through life. This isn't about achieving surrender. It's about remembering what trust feels like when you're no longer trying to control it. First, when your grip tightens, pause and name it. I'm afraid of losing this. I don't know what happens next. Don't judge the fear. Bring it to Christ as it is, not polished, not reworded, just honest. That moment of naming breaks the illusion of control. It lets you be carried, not just guided. Second, create space in your week for intentional release. It could be as small as closing your eyes for 2 minutes and saying, "I give this back to you." A relationship, a plan, a burden. Let that moment be your altar. Christ doesn't need a cathedral to meet you. He just needs your permission to enter the silence. Third, live today as if you are already held, because you are. Let your actions reflect the trust you're learning to embody. That might look like slowing down, forgiving quicker, or simply resting without guilt. Faith isn't only what you feel, it's how you move, even with trembling steps. I remember once watching a leaf fall from a tree. No resistance, no panic, just letting go, trusting the wind. And for a second, I thought, maybe that's all we're ever being asked to do. Not to control the wind, but to trust what carries us when we stop holding everything up on our own. You don't have to understand the whole path. You just need to remember who walks it with you. The one who sees your fear and doesn't step back. The one who knows your grip before you admit it and still whispers, "Come to me," even with that. So, when you feel the weight rise again, when anxiety creeps in, when your hands tighten, pause. Place your hand on your chest. Say, "I am here," and you are here. You don't need to go further than that. The sacred begins exactly where you are. If you're still listening, maybe your feelings soften. Maybe you're realizing that the cost of control has been your peace. And maybe, just maybe, you're ready to trade it, not for answers, but for presence. Not for guarantees, but for trust. This isn't a performance, it's a relationship. And relationships grow through honesty, not perfection. Through returning, not rushing. Through silence, not strategy. Christ isn't asking you to solve the mystery. He's asking you to walk with Him through it. Letting go is not forgetting. It's remembering who you are without what you're holding. It's stepping out of the old definitions and into something truer. You are not your pain. You are not your plan. You are not the weight you thought you had to carry to be strong. The more you practice this, the more your heart begins to feel lighter. Not because life is easier, but because you are no longer fighting it alone. You are walking with Christ, listening more, demanding less. And in that surrender, something in you breathes again. And if you feel like you'll forget all this tomorrow, that's okay. Just remember this one thing. You can return. You can always return to your breath, to your center, to Christ. That's where the rhythm begins again. Soft, real, possible. I hope this space reminded you of something you already knew, that you are not late and you are not alone, that you can release what was never yours to hold, and that grace is not waiting for you to improve. It's already reaching for you now. If this message spoke to your heart, I invite you to stay close. Subscribe to the channel, not to consume more content, but to walk together, to keep remembering, step by step, what matters, what heals, what brings you back. You'll find other videos here on presence, clarity, emotional freedom, and faith without performance. This is a space for quiet awakenings, for breathing with meaning, for remembering that with Christ, you don't have to hold it all. You only need to be held. Let this be a final breath, not of ending, but of remembering. A quiet place you can return to when the world starts to spin too fast again. A moment that stays with you, like soft light at the edge of your day. You don't have to hold it perfectly, just let it live in you, here, now. May God bless you deeply, and may you walk awake, with Christ at the center.